on for the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to chat about a few hot topics in the speaking space, specifically how to finish the year on a high note, current hot topics in the speaking industry, and then customizing your keynote for diverse audiences. So we're going to get through those in about probably 10 or 15 minutes and do a live Q&A for the rest of the time. And the last time we did this in August, that's really where I think everybody got a ton of value out of the question. So if you have any questions, please chime in anytime. And then also, as questions are going around, if there's any thoughts, insights, advice, experience, please everyone chime in. We definitely want it to be a free flowing conversation. And then before we kick off, for those who don't know Alec, the CEO of Gotham Artists, a leading speakers bureau, founded the company 17 years ago. Alec, I believe.
15 years.
We'll give you a plus two. I'll tell you what, but 15 years and really one of the leaders in the speaking space. But Alec, maybe you wanted to say a few words before we get started.
Sure. I know many of you already. I'm meeting some of you for the first time, but I've been in this industry. I'm one of these very fortunate people where I just fell ass backwards into it. And like everything good in life, I went from college to law school, immediately hated that. Went from law school to work for this attorney. The attorney was an entertainment lawyer. That's how I landed at a place called Greater Talent Network. And I was like, ooh, that sounds like fun. And then I met my business partner there. And after 3 years, we left and started Gotham. And then 3 years ago now, I bought him out. So I'm the sole owner of Gotham currently. And it's been a fun ride. And I'm honored that Connor entrusts me to speak to all his clients. And so thank you for putting faith in me, Connor.
Oh, of course. Thank you for the time, Alec. We appreciate it.
And do you want to throw the agenda in the sidebar here in the chat so we all have it?
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a good segue. If we want to kick off, Alec, I know we chatted briefly earlier. You had some thoughts on how to finish the year on a high note. If you want to kick off with that discussion, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking about that with Connor earlier today, and a lot of this is stuff you might know already, and maybe you've heard at various other functions or from other agents. But this time we're wrapping up busy season. Events are playing now, and come like mid-November, it dies and it falls off in a big way. We have very few events play in December. That's the time where you could be sowing seeds instead of reaping, right? That's when you build relationships between November 15th and December 15th before everyone leaves. The things for like last minute quick hits, the sales kickoff is what everyone's still talking about. Most people have booked theirs already, but there's plenty of people who are late to the game. We got an email today for someone who wants to do something this Monday. So there's always, we'll see if they have the budget, but there's always an opportunity for these last minute sales kickoffs. There's that use it or lose it money that a lot of companies have. So if they haven't spent it by the end of the fiscal year, they're not going to get that reappropriated to them this year. So a lot of times they're going to want to close something just so that they can spend that money. And so if you have existing buyers, existing clients you work with, now is probably a good time to hit them up and be like, do you want to put something, we'll TBD the date. We don't need to know the date yet or even the location. But if you need to spend that money now so that you don't lose it, we'll send you a contract for one speaking engagement with TBD date and location. And we'll figure that out in January. By the time you have, as we say in the business, if you have the money, you have the power. So if you have that already signed, sealed, and delivered, then don't worry about when they're going to actually schedule you. You'll figure that out. So that's how I would spend the last couple of months. And you want to be building the relationships now that the meeting planners are finally coming up to breathe. Like if you're pitching now, it's probably falling on deaf ears because they're so busy with event execution. But by mid-November, they'll be ready to listen. And don't send gifts after December 5th because then everyone's out of the office. So you just certainly don't send anything that's perishable because it'll go bad.
That's great advice, Alec. And as you were talking, any thoughts on pitching yourself as a keynote speaker versus a workshop? I think that's a conversation that we've had probably with a handful of people on this call. But is there more flexibility if you're saying, hey, towards the end of the year, book me for a workshop? Or
you know how I hate workshops.
I know you're not a fan.
I just feel like by accident, we landed in the juiciest end of the pool in the speaking
Mhm.
engagements where it's the highest revenue with the least work. It's still work, certainly for the speaker, but compared to a workshop, by the time you figure out how to do all that workshop stuff, your hourly rate has diminished greatly. So if you could stay in the keynote lane, I mean, a lot of speakers are under the belief that, oh, I can extend, I can go long tail, I can get a workshop, but then you start to resent the workshop because you're like, I got paid 15,000 for the keynote and I'm getting paid the same for the workshop, and I'm working 4 times harder and doing 4 times the amount of effort. So I would say sell the second keynote would be a better move.
Mhm. Yeah, no doubt. Especially if all comes down to if you're not passionate, if you really hate actually doing the work of the workshops, then yeah, absolutely stay away
Yeah.
from it. That's good advice. Let's see, we can roll into number two. Any hot topics? I know last time we talked about moving away from DE&I, more growth sales, but what have you seen in the past couple of months or leading into Q1 of 2025? Trending topics in the speaking space.
I should ask my chief marketing officer that. He knows. So no, the age of the motivational speaker is back, I feel like. I really feel like in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of return to they want to inspire their audiences. Teams are finally back together. So it's that teamwork message. It's a lot of that rah rah. They want you to be a cheerleader for their company, right? And sometimes to say the things that like if the CEO said it, it would fall flat. But if the external third party keynote speaker says it, it resonates, right? Where it's like you're hearing it from somewhere else. But if you're in that pure motivational lane, it's a good place to be right now, especially with sales kickoffs. That's what they're looking for. I think friend Paul Epstein, I think he excels in that space of like it's sports messaging, it's rah rah, it's get out off your seats, get off your ass and go get them type of mentality. That's what's selling in the at least for the sales teams, and the sales audiences are a lot of the audiences that we're selling to. You got your sales teams, you also have your HR teams, right? And the HR teams are going to be more focused on crisis communication, teamwork, team building, right? How do we all work together? And certainly speaking different languages with multi-generational speakers are always going to be popular because how does the 60-year-old boss talk to the 22-year-old new person, and how do they actually collaborate and work well as a team together? So I feel like that's going to always be a communications message is going to be always well received, and like a rah rah sales speaker is going to also do well for first quarter.
Going back to the motivational angle, let's say I see Natalie just joined, so I'm going to jump on your keynote topic here. So hers is around creativity, innovation. Do you suggest, is it worth speakers not adding maybe a full keynote topic, but is there anything that you can do as a speaker to tweak your messaging a little bit to have that more motivational rah rah tone, if you will, even though your traditional keynote may not be as motivational?
That's funny you should say that because we were just having this conversation with one of our speakers where the new um sizzle reel is like too emotional, and it got to a point where it was almost like a turn off because it was like we don't want our people to cry. It's like you want them to you want those ugly tears. You don't want them to know they're gonna have the ugly tears. They're supposed to go on that emotional journey. A great speaker will take you on that emotional journey from the laughs to the tears back to the laughs. But if your sizzle reel is gonna be like so emotional, you could turn off a meeting plan and be like, I'm not trying to have like an Oprah like moment at my conference. Um, so you want to lean towards you don't want to get too serious in there, right? The keynote needs to be somewhat light. You can talk about serious topics for sure, and most of the speakers that we work with, they're going to have some kind of very interesting backstory about adversity and something horrible that they've overcome. But if you lead with that, you might risk turning off potential buyers. Lead the premise of what they're going to gain from your message, right? And not necessarily like the personal journey that you went through, because that could be off-putting. We found that we might go back to the old sizzle reel.
Mhm. And that leads me back to a question. We talked about it in Virginia Beach at the retreat of Impact 11's PCT, of course, the problem, the credibility, the transformation. We know Jim and Mike really both were saying, they know loosely what the PCT is, but lean heavier into your credibility rather than the problem that you're solving, because most event planners already have an idea in mind of this is what I want my speaker to do at the event. But any thoughts, Alec, on overall branding and positioning if we're not leaning more, we're straying away from the emotional side, straying away from the problems? Would you suggest for speakers to lean, double down on their personal credibility, then of course what audience members are going to get out of it, the transformation?
There's no harm in that. Let me see how to answer that. I've said this maybe 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,001, which is like you have to think of like where the meeting planner is coming from. So they're coming from the following places usually, which is like it's usually their first or second job out of school. They're usually under in high stress, underpaid, nervous. They're coming from a place of fear most of the time, right? They're coming from a place of like if this goes right, I get no credit. If this goes wrong, I get fired. So they have bosses. They're trying to climb the corporate ladder. They tend to be female. They tend to be well educated. But what they're looking for is safety, psychological safety, if you will. So you have to, that's why if you have a program that gets really heavy, like Shola, for example, he has a near suicide story and as part of his messaging, you get too heavy, like they're going to be like, well, you're going to spook them, right? So if they're coming from a place of fear, you have to start first and foremost to allay their fears, right? I'm going to be great. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to give you exactly these 3 bullet points that we talked about on the pre-offer call or even the pre-event call, and that's what I'm going to deliver on. So you can give them consistency, and you can give them that the same thing you said on Monday, what you're going to say on Tuesday. That'll win you more opportunities than I would say, because we were about to get into the idea of like, should you tweak? Should you change your messaging? Should you try and make it unique to each audience? And there's an argument to be made that you don't do that. That our friends over at Heroic Public Speaking would argue, if you did your job right, you give your speech. If your speech is really nailed down, someone's going to come up to you after and be like, I want you to give that same exact speech to my audience. Not, I want you to tweak it to my audience, or I want you to make it custom for me. I want that speech. That's the speech. So really dialing down your content is a way to uh, lay the fears of meeting planners, right? What they see is what they get.
Any tips on making sure that your keynote, I know you use the word universality all the time, which that's what you're getting back to. Of course, if the keynote's applicable to one audience, it will be for the next. But any tips there, making sure that you do have an evergreen, universally applicable keynote?
Well, that's tougher for me because remember, I'm the guy on this call who's never given a keynote, right? Uh, Everyone here probably has a lot more experience. I know they have a lot more experience speaking from the stage than I have and probably ever will. I'm very happy being behind the scenes. It's good for me. So I don't know that I'm like qualified to answer that. And these are these universal themes that we've been talking about for as humans for thousands of years that you can go to. It's back to this idea of no, I don't have a good answer for that, to be honest. Let me think about that.
Mhm. Or, no, all good there.
I'm open to the crowd
Yeah,
if they
that's a
can
good. No,
answer
that's
that.
a good segue. If anybody has thoughts on that, or now is a good time to open it up for Q and A's. Any burning questions? I think we can dive into Q and A portion as well.
Hey, this is Jack. I like quiet air sometimes. I know I haven't seen another one of you in a bit. I had a call with Josh 2 weeks ago and talking about my topic of decision making. And I know you said the rah rah rah, but his big point of the call was I'm really focused on the empathy piece of it. And he actually got into the whole sales side of things because what I conveyed was whether you're greedy or altruistic, really delving into that. And so I'm finishing up a story to push out kind of late for SKO season, but I just want to get your reaction.
Rephrase it. But you're saying altruism versus greedy?
No, the whole concept of empathy,
Empathy.
understanding who you're, either selling to, working with your partners, and seeing that we're going into SKO season
Mhm.
instead of being rah rah rah, let's get excited, but changing the mindset instead of being, rah rah rah, but all right, how do we connect more? We've gotten this digital society that nobody's really connecting meaningfully as much anymore,
Yeah.
and really hammering home the whole notion of empathy, connection, meaningful, and trust.
Yeah.
Is
And
that
those tend to be the HR audiences too. They want to talk about connection. They want to talk about how do we function as a team? How do we get to know each other? How do we get to trust each other? It's why like those folks, like any of those speakers from like the Navy pilots, afterburners type things, like that's the whole thing. It's like we're flying, these planes at thousands of miles per hour, 2 feet from each other. It's like it's got to be about trust and flawless execution, I think they call it. But the other idea that I'd like to challenge everyone with is the notion that a meeting planner or an event is looking for change, right? That they say they're looking to be challenged. They say they're looking for growth, but what they're really looking for is a revalidation of what they're already doing. Now, whether that's, and it's just a theory, it's just a thought, but you know, that might be a little cynical, perhaps, which could be one of the criticisms you could lay on me. But the idea that they actually want to improve, other than just the pat on the back, you're doing great, keep doing what you're doing. Like that is something that's delicate, right? They say they want to be challenged, but I question whether they really do. They want to be proven right, right? The chief marketing officer, the chief sales officer, or revenue officer, they want to be proven right. They don't want to be challenged. A challenge to them is a challenge to the whole identity. So you have to be very careful, especially with the sales kickoffs, of you don't rock the boat too much. I think Linkner is pretty good at that. He can challenge them to think differently without making them have like an existential crisis about like, are we doing everything wrong?
Okay.
I don't know if that
I don't want to
answers.
take all the airtime. A lot of part of the thought. I won't take the airtime, but stage feedback. Appreciate it.
Alec, this is Tony. I have a question. So I spoke with Neighborly with Mosquito Joe, and it was kind of interesting along the same line here. I met with the president of Mosquito Joe, and I was just like, I talked to him the day before about his challenges that they were suffering from their marketing and the franchisees, and they were complaining about their marketing. They have to spend 9% on marketing. So when I went into the meeting with 40 of the executives from all over the country, it was more about I already had to know what the CEO was struggling with. So when I went into it, I kind of, by the end of it, I dove in and said, it's really not the marketing, it's the alignment of the brand, because they truly don't know what they're selling, what their competition, how they differentiate themselves. So I have two more sales meetings coming up, and I love the fact that you said it. But I'm speaking with Wells Fargo next week, but they want me to come in and re-energize the team and making sure that they're actually creating relationships with their clients. So I'm diving in deep into that next week, that you're not just selling stocks, that you're creating a relationship with your client. So it's the same exact thing, like that fine line to say, hey, everything that you've learned in school and everything you're doing, I'm going to show you a different path.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. It can be dangerous to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, everything that your bosses have been telling you for the last 4 years, throw it out the window. We're going to do it this way now. But there is what I'm sure you've heard the expression, chocolate covered broccoli, right? So it's like
Yes.
you have to give it to them in a way that they can digest, but that maybe can affect change within their organization. And that's, credit to every speaker who can do that. It's not an easy thing to do.
Right. And then I love you real quick, just with your street cred. So like one of my biggest issues is like not an issue. It's my PCT is that I have 300 employees. I'm running multiple companies right now. So I was talking with Gail from GDA, and she was saying the same thing. Like, God, I had no idea that you're running this many companies and have employees and resonate what you were just saying. I'm a 56-year-old with tons of 25-year-old employees. You know what I'm saying? So how do I get that across to bureaus or even to the meeting planners? I'm saying that, hey, I have the street cred. I'm in the mix every day. And like I'm struggling getting that message out. Or is it just getting on LinkedIn and just showing me like on a construction site or in a restaurant? Or
Yeah, I didn't even know that. And I know you pretty well. I didn't know or know of you well. And I didn't know you had 300 employees. I can hardly handle the 16 that we have. I think 300.
I have no hair. That's why.
Well, I'm hanging on, but
There you go. But no, like Gail was saying the same thing. She's like, I had no idea. I've known her for 3 years,
yeah, yeah, that's to your the credibility factor, right? You have
Right,
to find a way to tell that story, and especially if your message is around like leading people.
right,
Well, like, why you? I was like, well, I lead 300 people.
right.
So, get
Awesome.
the story told.
Yeah, thank you. That's just a struggle. So,
Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah.
I feel for you. 300
Thank
people.
you. I
We
love
have,
people that.
we have one question from Andre in the chat. Alec, if you want to take this one, but
Yeah.
Andre said if your speech does have heavy elements like talking about mental health or suicide, what is the emotional journey that you've seen be successful for speakers in terms of audiences being willing to go on that journey and come out of the other side feeling more moved and inspired?
Yeah, I think the issue there is once you're on the stage, you could do your thing, right? But it's getting the booking, right? And so once they feel comfortable with you that you can deliver, then you can take them on that emotional journey. And I've seen, I mean, one of the goats I think is this guy J.R. Martinez. He was a roadside bombing victim survivor in Iraq. He was on Dancing with the Stars. He became an actor. I mean, his acting chops definitely comes through. He takes you to such a crazy place. You feel like you're in a theatrical experience almost when you see him speak. And he's been doing the same exact speech for 15 years and doing it very well. But how do you get the booking first, right? So getting that is like I mentioned earlier, you got to make the meeting planner comfortable. They have to know you can't blindside them and like not mention that it's going to go places, but focus on what is the end game. Like here's what your audience is going to feel or do or be changed by after you hear me speak, right? And yeah, we're going to go dark, we're going to go to heavy places, but when they come out, there's going to be a weight lifted. And the right meeting planner will take that chance with you and take that journey with you.
Awesome. Let's see. We'll open it back up. Any other questions from the crew? Any thoughts on everybody's mind?
Just a quick one. It's Boo here. How are you guys? Thank you very much for organizing this. It's super insightful. Um, there seems to have been a lot more pressure on budgets than used to be. Is that a perception, and we're just not as valuable as we used to be as speakers, or pre-COVID has it just seems like the average ticket price for a keynote is about 10K less than it used to be? Or are you guys just seeing it's fully bounced back, same as it was pre-COVID? And there just seems to be a lot more speakers in the market. Is there some sort of commercial insight you guys have got on that?
Oof, Boo, you're gonna have to go get a drink because I got a lot to say about this. All right, so one is like just background about me, where I'm coming from with all this is I grew up, lower middle class, like didn't have, it wasn't starving, but it wasn't like I'm still blown away that anyone gets paid $15,000 for a speech, let alone 50, let alone 150. It's like mind-boggling to me, but they want to write the checks. I'm not going to tell them no. So starting with that as like my kind of like, who I am intrinsically. Now I'll answer your question, which is prices have gone up. Our average deal size has gone up since COVID. What we saw specifically, like right after, like 2022, when people were getting back into meetings, was they wanted to really force people to come back, and the only way to do that was to just double down on even bigger names. So we were the beneficiaries of groups that normally would spend $50,000 are suddenly going to spend $200,000 because they want to bring in a celebrity that's going to draw butts into seats. Whether that money actually paid off and they actually got more butts into seats, remains a bit of a question mark, I would say. But that became more of like a feast or famine situation where it was like you have some speakers who are doing $100,000 and the inquiries cannot stop coming. God bless, we could all be in that situation. And then you have other speakers that are in that 10,000 mark and they can't get that first or second gig, right? And that is that catch 22 of like, by the time you need a bureau, you don't need a bureau anymore. One of those situations. So I would say prices have stayed steady. I would say that it's going higher and higher. I would say when I started in the industry, like to be credible as a speaker, you had to be charging at least $7,500. These days, in order to be credible as a speaker, it's about double that. You need to be in the $15,000 range, right? Anything below that, they're like, well, why are they so cheap? They can't be good if they're that cheap. So it's like we've had a situation where they wanted to pay the speaker more because otherwise they couldn't sell it to their boss. They don't. He wants a $25,000 speaker. I'm like, okay, it's $25,000. What do you want to tell me? So I would challenge the assumption that the prices have gone down. There's been some tightness on budgets. There's also been a little bit of reluctance with the election. We get that feeling, unless, I mean, WSB is thrilled. The political speakers are back in vogue for the years. But I think there's a bit of a wait and see what happens to America in a couple of weeks type of vibe. And then I don't like, your guess is as good as mine what'll happen after that. But fingers crossed it'll be good things.
Awesome, mate. Thanks, Alec. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Alec, I have a
Well,
question
good.
for you. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, how do you gain trust as a speaker? How do I gain your trust as a bureau? And it doesn't have to be necessarily your bureau, but like, well, how did you develop that relationship with speakers over time that you feel confident in booking them?
We're much like the meeting planners themselves. We are creatures of habit and creatures of validation. So when you see everybody wants what everybody wants, I forget who said that one. I think I heard that at Impact 11. Um, and so that explains also why the top of the market continues to do so well, and because like everyone knows those names. So we'll be pitching the same 10 names that Gail Davis is pitching and Beat Kink is pitching and all the other bureaus are pitching because we know that they do a good job. Because in our mind, we're thinking, well, if they weren't good, why would they be getting booked so much? Although we could talk about how plenty of people who aren't good get booked plenty. So you kind of go on runs with people, right? You kind of get lucky. Like a lot of the time, what'll happen is a buyer will actually tell us about a speaker that we've never heard of before, and then we'll be like Shola Richards, who's like our number one speaker. We're primarily non-exclusive. We have like four. He's one of them. That came because a buyer asked one of our agents to go find him, and then that led to a relationship. And when he did well on that first one, it led to us recommending him for another one. Getting past that first gig is very tricky. Some speakers, if they're lucky enough that they have inbound to share with an agency, you could do that as a way, but even that is not a guarantee that it'll lead to additional bookings, but it gets you at least on their radar. The bureau specifically, we're hit up every day, multiple times a day, so it's really hard to stand out. The only way I can think of is you come with a pre-made booking for us and I give it to one of the agents. But again, even that is like a crapshoot, so it may not be worth it to do. Like I said earlier, by the time you need us, you don't need us anymore. So it really is, you got to, lift by your own bootstraps.
Any thoughts, Alec, on speakers that already have, I'd say, a solid relationship with the bureau? And this is a topic of discussion on Impact 11, but how often should you be updating an agent, anybody at a bureau, and what should you be saying to them? I'll give you a few examples of, past event updates. If you got published in a major media outlet, have a book on the way, new sizzle reel, new video, but what should be in those updates? And then how often, what in regard to frequency of reaching out to bureaus with updates, what do you think would be a good cadence?
I would say no more than once a quarter. All right. This is about right. So remember, it shouldn't be like a blast. You should be working on developing individual relationships with agents. It's not important to know Gotham artists. It's important to know Mike at Gotham Artists. It's important to know Liz at Gotham Artists, right? That is what you want to be doing with every agency. So like, ironically, I love this part that I'm like the least valuable person to a speaker because at Gotham, because I don't do that much direct booking. I mean, Tony, if someone came to you and asked you to like make spaghetti and meatballs, it's like, that's not my part of the job, right? So similarly, like it's the individual agents that you want to identify. And by the way, they're listed on every single bureau's page, the About Us page. Each agent, you find someone who has a cool bio that you resonate with, introduce yourself to that agent. Don't go to the head, go to the infantry, right? Go to the Marines, the front line of the business, of which every agency has, all the mid-sized bureaus have probably between 5 and 9 booking agents. So look for those people is where I would start. So, and as far as updates, here's one pet peeve. This might just be me. Other people might feel differently. But when a speaker emails me, I just booked that and I just booked this and I just booked this, I'm like, well, you didn't book it with Gotham, so why are you telling me? It's like, it's like that doesn't help the agent. If anything, it annoys them that they didn't get the booking. So I would focus on maybe like, here are the industries that I'm doing well in, right? And here's why I'm doing well in those industries, right? And don't mention specific companies. You think it helps to mention CBRE or JP Morgan. It'd be more helpful to be like, I've been doing a lot in the real estate sector. I've been doing a lot in the banking sector. Here's what's resonating with those. And then the agent will say to themselves, I have some clients in the real estate sector. I have some clients in the business sector, and they will then start to pitch you in those situations.
That's great advice. That's like what we do from the Gotham side of teeing up to event planners. XYZ speaker would be perfect for these list of events, but the speaker can do the
Yeah.
same. You should have to be
And
ready.
also one of our big policies is like solutions oriented marketing, right? It has to be about them, not about you, right? If it's about you, they tune out. If it's about them, here's why what the speaker can do for your audience, for your ROI, for your newest salespeople. That is where you want to spend the bulk of your marketing messaging, is around what your solution is to their problem.
Love it. And maybe we'll open this one up to all of the speakers, but you mentioned this sending leads to bureaus, where I know Paul is probably one of the best examples, where I know he started sending, he would get inbound and then he would send them to different bureaus, different agents at bureaus. And I think he's done a really good job of seeing those pay off into multiple engagements. But maybe we open this one up to speakers. If any experience kicking a lead to a bureau or an event to a bureau, and that actually, bearing fruit, if you will, for more engagements. But I would love to hear if any speaker on the call has experience in sending leads to a bureau that they did see ROI from.
Yeah, I'll jump in if you want. I think the first thing in terms of seeing ROI from it is just kind of tracking ROI from it, right? Like I keep in the dashboard that I use, I do keep a list of like who have I given business to and then who's given me holds back. Not necessarily gigs, because an agent can't control whether or not I close the deal, but at least mention me more often. So I keep that. I think the other thing too is to know in passing off, and Alec, you can tell me I'm totally off on this, but in passing off leads, one of the questions I tend to ask specific agents is when in the process would you like the lead? Some agents seem like they want to take it from the very first call and they want to earn everything, and others are like, well, I want it to be qualified and know that they've got budget and a date and this and that, and then others are like, just send me when it's ready to go to contract. So it's very very different. The last thing you want to do is send an agent like I wouldn't even call it a lead, an inquiry, right? That just fizzles out and then you look like an unserious person. But other agents love that and want to sell it, right? So I think it starts with knowing that, right?
Prior to the offer, before they're ready to submit an offer, that's when you want to loop in the agent, right? Then they can be aligned with you, same page, know, what are you willing to do, at what price, make sure we're all aligned and that there's no surprises. But if it's a huge company, we're always looking at the end of that email address. If it's at PepsiCo.com, send it early. That's fine. Like we can work with that. Get them in the mailing list. But I just thought of two other things of like the getting in with the bureaus. One, like when Connor asked me to look at someone, I take it differently than when an email comes in. When Marjana over at Speaker Story Bank, her and Tony D'Amelio, there's a lot of examples of people like by the time that Marjana's telling me about someone, I don't have to like double validate it. I'm confident that she's already vetted it for us. And then she sends it, like this woman, Andrea Hollingsworth. It's like suddenly we got like 4 or 5 bookings for her. I don't know. It came out of nowhere. I'm still not even sure I know what she talks about. I got to go back and do some research and find out. But that is an example of like a backdoor to the bureaus, is talk to the Marjanas of the world, right? She's not even quite a manager. She's more in like what would you call it? Like content development would be her specialty, but she's got such deep relationships with all the bureaus, because this industry is so small. People have left one place, gone to another. Everyone knows Marjana. Everyone knows Tony D'Amelio. They're known quantities. So if you can get them on your side, that's like having an inside track to all the bureaus. Instead of individually going to the bureaus, you go to someone like her, someone like Connor, someone like, well, Holly Catchpole is like probably too busy right now. There's a few examples I can send after this call. These are the speaker bureau whisperers.
And what about taking this in a different?
I'll Connor knows this because Connor's worked on. Connor's updated my website completely, but I list all the agencies that generally book me on the site. It's actually what's really interesting is it kind of goes up and down. I've done a lot with Gotham over the last couple of years. Then there was a time before that I didn't do much. There was probably a time before that I did more, and kind of cycles back and forth. I did a lot with Big Speak for a while, and I did nothing for a long time. And so these things ebb and flow. But I do take anything that comes in from the website, which I have a contact form, and I always give it to an agency. And I usually give it to the agency that has been doing great by me for the last 12, 18 months. I don't book myself. I don't want to book myself. I don't have time for that. Give it to the agency. They sort it all out. And I don't know, 7 times out of 10, it turns into a real booking, and they're super happy. But they're already happy with me because there's already that relationship that's been working. So even if it doesn't turn into a booking this time, it's a new contact for them to follow up on the next year's conference or whatever it is.
And I think we just had you at something, Kevin. I saw the name.
You just had me at. I can tell you, I think 4 things this year. Hang on, I can answer that. Gotham. I think 3 or 4 this year. I have to look on my list, but something like that.
That's great. Congratulations.
Good. It's going well.
No, I'm happy. 3 to 4. I mean, that's good. To be honest, we don't, as a non-exclusive agency, like we're not booking. We'll book 100 people one time, but no people 100 times. I think our most speakers like 20.
I do about 40 a year, 40 keynotes a year or so. So
a solid 10% for Gotham. Well done.
Yeah. I want you to do more. You guys are wonderful. So
feel free to send more leads. It's all good.
Send more leads. Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Never feel shy about sending leads. If you learned anything today from this session.
Well, I would say the thing is for probably all of us, and I don't know if 40 is a lot, if it's a little, if I should try to do 60 or 70 or 20. I actually don't know the stats, right? I have no idea. I just go out and go where I'm told.
Yeah, 40's healthy. I would say, if you don't need more, don't do more. But I'm the guy, I don't even like getting on a plane twice a year. I don't know how you people do this, but
I love planes.
Yeah, good for you. You guys,
I love it.
Guys and gals
I sit there, I work, we land. Easy.
Question, Catherine?
Yeah, thanks. Speaking about planes, welcome. Hello from Sydney, Australia. So the question I have, and I'm starting out. I'm not too bad well known in the live speaking in Australia, but I'm learning about the virtual speaking network, and I was just wanting to know what the trend is. I haven't broken into the US market, but what the trend is that you're seeing for the virtual speaking.
It's less than 10% of our revenue.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas in 2020 was 100% of our revenue. And we'll do it, but the real money is in the live events, and also the real soul feeding part of the business is in the live events. The virtuals just don't seem to do that for us in the same way. The exception, I would argue, is for big decentralized companies, your multinational companies where it's impossible for them to get all their people into one place. That works for them, but it's hard to get those types of bookings. As the Linkner and the Impact 11 people will tell you, our biggest challenge isn't the other bureaus. Our biggest challenge is the direct market, and all of those virtual events for those multinational companies, they're happening internal, closed door. You don't even know they're happening, unless you booked it, right? There's no social media about it. Very hard to track those for us. But I know that they exist and they go on, and if you can get in with one of those, it can be lucrative.
Do bureaus tend to be North America specific, or do you see global bookings?
Well, we have a couple around the globe, but the US market is by far the most robust, and I'm in New York City, probably within 2 blocks of here, there's an event going on that I didn't book, so we really want to focus on the US first. That's me personally. Listen, we chased money in Belize, it didn't work out. You can read the Google review all about it. But it's definitely in our best interest to stick with the US centric. And if you're based in Sydney, I would say I would focus on that. There's so much money to be made in Sydney, in your backyard, before crossing the Pacific.
Thanks, Alec.
Frankie, you've been very quiet this time. Come on. Didn't you have questions?
Hey,
No questions, Natalie?
I didn't have that many questions. Everything's kind of gotten answered. I had an idea earlier, but then I got distracted by all of my like offline chats with everybody at the same time. That's where everything goes sideways with these Zooms. It goes to Q&A, and if I'm being honest, I've got too many.
Are you guys talking shit?
No, nobody has some shit.
No,
Like,
that's my bad. I've been yelling at the bots in the comments.
Yeah,
to
the
mute
bot is
myself.
about to sign off. I didn't hear anything, but no, actually, I haven't heard any shit on you, Alec. You're good.
I could take it.
Yeah. No, I feel like most of the questions were answered. I had a couple about, it is interesting what she was asking about virtual, because there's still a virtual deal, but it's ironically, it's more of that workshop-esque masterclass type of stuff that I know that you said you love. So I plan on sending you a couple of leads on extended workshop masterclasses, only virtual.
Yes, all virtual.
Did I hear that right? Only virtual. Okay.
Only virtual, please.
No, all good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Go ahead, Natalie.
I was more interested in what people
Alert from low battery.
Wait, say it again.
It's me. Oh, someone has a low battery. No, I was just curious to understand your perspective on when we as speakers share leads, because I have that as a strategy, and it just looked like it would go into this void. I would hear nothing back. I wouldn't hear any kind of follow-up from the bureaus. And so I just kind of wondered, was my lead passed on to another speaker? Are you just getting really busy? So it's helpful to hear from a range of other people on this call their success in working with bureaus, and it's something I'll revisit. But I felt like I got a bit stung by it, because I thought it was going to make sense as a strategy. I know Heather McGowan well, and she uses that as a strategy. So yeah, and I also always appreciate feedback. And so wasn't sure why it wasn't always coming through when it come direct, and I would share with bureaus, but it's definitely something I'm willing to revisit.
Well, it's very scary. I mean, everyone here is like a solopreneur, right? And like you're running your own business on the speaking side. And the thought of giving that up to someone who barely knows you, and like this is income we're talking about, I can understand why that's scary. We had a speaker who I love, who like we tried to sign exclusively, but he could never get over the idea of like, you got to send us the leads right away. You got to send us. He like kept trying to negotiate them on his own, and it was like there was just a lack. I don't even call it a lack of trust or a fear factor or something, but that made it hard for us to work together, right? Because there was not that trust, and to be fair, maybe we hadn't earned the trust. So that's why I'm recommending do it when it's at offer stage. Because if we drop the ball at that point, then you know it's us, right? But if you're sending it to us at it just came in and you don't know if this person has budget. Oh, it's from PepsiCo, but it's from the ERG that has $5,000. So you may be unsure if you're sending it to us later in the process. And there's certain speakers, I forget who I was just talking to about this. Oh, she's like a health and wellness woman who's like getting $80,000 to go to Bali and things like that. And I'm like, I can't help you with that. You are probably your best salesperson, and without you, it doesn't work. So an agency is not going to help someone like that, right? And there's some speakers who like they're better off not using an agency. They can sell it better than the agent ever could, And so usually I would say you want an agency when for administrative backload, you don't look at them as a sales machine, because it's unfortunately not always.
I totally hear you, and I was actually coming from a place of generosity and sharing, not at all from a scarcity mind, but that's why I was doing it repeatedly. So no, I for me it made sense, because it's an operational expertise that the bureaus have. Why would I want to, exert my resources and people on my team to do that when that's not their expertise?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have every speaker is going to be different. Every agent's going to be different. It comes down to individual relationships. And if you find someone that you gel with, right? Like Andrea Hollingsworth and Liz on my team, they just gel. I can't explain it. That's working. If she had given it to someone else on the team, maybe it wouldn't. So, that's a little bit of luck too.
I think that's important, Alec. I mean, I've certainly found over the years that it seems to be particular bureau reps that land most volume, and then you get onesies and twosies. And one of the challenges with, I guess, selling through a bureau from my perspective and what we've done at Afterburner is often it's everyone perceives what you do differently, right? And as you said, there's some speakers that have a huge fee. Some people don't even know what they talk about. So I guess it's on the flip side, when you talk about speakers giving leads to a bureau and people being able to sell themselves better, I think there's sometimes that's the barrier. There can be a bit of a hesitancy in passing off a lead if you feel that maybe you're not well understood and someone is trying to sell you but maybe misses some of the nuances. And here's a bunch of fighter pilots that talk about fighter pilot stuff versus here's some pretty smart mindset people that talk about elevating growth mindset. So how do bureaus get swamped? You got tons of speakers. Every second person has speaker in their title on LinkedIn. So on the pro quo, what gets a bureau rep to invest in your story to be able to sell you with some depth?
All right. Well, at every company, there's going to be those generous spirits who want to take the time to. I mean, I have 3 books on my desk right now from exclusive speakers that I haven't read. So there are a few at every company that, especially the younger people. I mean, it's all about the next generation already. I'm 43. It's the 20-something-year-old who's going to be the next great agent at this company. They're the ones who have the time and the resource. They have the time mostly to learn about new products and to spend all day pitching and selling. And so you want to find those junior people. You think you want the most senior people, but I'm more out of touch, like I said earlier, than the people who are booking every day. And getting them to care about your story, whew, tough one. Catch 22 also, they'll, like I said, most of our best relationships come because the buyer told us about a speaker. They did their research. They trust us to close the deal for them, to get that speaker at the best price and to show up when they're supposed to show up. And they tell us who they want. And unless we've had a bad experience with them, we're like, you shouldn't do that. More times than not, we're happy to go get what they want. Now, other times they're going to ask us for ideas. And you've all seen this before. You're going to get your standard kind of RFP of like, here's our budget, here's our theme, here's our audience, here's our location, here's our date. And then from those 5 data points, we're supposed to come up with a list of, some people will send 20 names. I like to send like 8. I like to send just a few pages of ideas and keep it as focused as I can. And if I'm lucky, they'll pick one of the 8. But more often than not, they'll come back and be like, have you heard of so-and-so who wasn't on the list at all and no one talked about? And then we're like, yes. And then we'll do that name. So it's a big issue for me. It's an industry issue, is like, we are still very much order takers and not curators. We're still a supermarket, not an art gallery. As much as I want to be an art gallery, I got to know my role, and I'm ShopRite.
Good insight. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound so cynical. These are positive things, and
I love that.
Not at all. It's I was just leaning into the conversation you were talking about leads, hot leads come in, send them straight through, and it's just, well, what if I send it through and the rep's telling me doesn't actually know.
Well, one idea you can do, a way to avoid that is do letters. So a way to combat that is you go in almost like a partnership. You're like, hey, I got this lead. I want to work with you on it. I'd like to set up a pre-offer call with them, and you do a tag team. And then the agent's invested, buyer's invested. You all 3 are on the same page. They get to see you in action on the pre-offer call. The pre-offer, which by the way has become much more common post-COVID. People want to vet more. It used to be like we would do a call contingent on an offer contingent on a satisfactory call. So we'd make them actually give us the offer before we'd even get them on the phone with the speaker. Now I'd say half the time they want to talk to the speaker before they put in an offer, and the speaker wants to talk to them. So it's like, great, that's better for everyone, I think. So that's one of the things I'm happy to see a positive change in the industry. It's like the speakers for the longest time were so standoffish. It's like, these people want they want to validate their decision. Help them validate their decision with a 15-minute phone call. And
All right, Alec, just to clarify, are you recommending that when a direct lead comes in, say it's an email inquiry, that we would reach out to you, for example, and then we would see if you want to partner on this, and then respond to the lead and with a pre-offer counter
or
invitation, and you would be on that?
Don't wait till the lead comes in. Already have kind of an understanding with a rep at a bureau and be like, when the next lead comes in, here's what I'm going to do. Then when that lead comes in, you reply right away, as you always do. You CC that agent on it and be like, thank you so much for reaching out. I would love to have a conversation about this. I'm looping in my colleague or my agent, so-and-so. We're going to set up a call, right? So you still drive the bus, but you've already pre-negotiated that your agent's going to be on the bus with you. So
Thank you.
I just thought of that. That's a good idea. These things are really helpful. I hope this is being recorded by 3 different AI machines.
Oh, it sure is. But we have 2 other questions in the chat here. Andre asked one earlier of overall time to booking. How often are you seeing companies booking that 30 to 45-day range for and overall, what is their typical?
Yeah, I could have checked that before I got on the call. I keep that statistic in Salesforce of the booking to event date time. It's grown back since COVID. It was like really tight, but there's still the random, like I said, 4-day notice thing. But for the longest time, people were not booking. Prior to COVID, you were looking at 3 to 6 months was your average booking to event play window. Let's say 4.5 months. It came way down. Now it's come back up. But the average is misleading because you're going to have some people doing a week, and then you're going to have some people. We have something booked for 2026 already. So both exist, and the market's so big that you could be the beneficiary of both. There's definitely last minute deals to be had.
That's great insight. And then one more question from Tara. This actually has come up a couple times with speakers that we're working closely with. Tara asked if the 5K virtual gig or referrals is worth your time. I think that also, like, or as I know, kick one to Liz, I believe was around 10K in Canada, but I know we prefer, the 15K plus at a bureau. Is there a fee range, Alec, that you'd suggest to kick either an offer or a gig to? Is there a bare minimum?
Yeah, I would say my even 15 years ago when I worked at Greater Talent Network, they had the floor was a $1,500 commission. If it was under $1,500, they didn't want you to book the date, right? And so I'm sure that number has only gone up. For us, probably on paper, a $2,000 commission is like just enough for it to be worth it in terms of like deploying the resources, our logistics team, our contracts team. And then of course you do these $5,000 ones and it seems like it's going to be smooth. And they're like, and here's our vendor registration packet. And it's like 30 hours of work after that. And you're like, no, don't make me fill out another vendor registration form. So the short answer is like 10 and above is probably worth sharing, right? 5 and below. I mean, even with our exclusive speakers or preferreds, we call some of them, if it comes in at 5, we tell them to just book it directly. All right, it's just easier.
Mm-hmm.
But don't do 5K gigs if you can avoid it. Do 10K gigs.
Touche. Well, any last question before we wrap? All good?
Perfect.
We'll close out, but thank you everybody for the time. And Alec, thank you so much for.
Thank you guys. Thanks for listening, and you make me feel like an expert. I feel like I'm the speaker. This is great. That'll be $20,000. You can send the check, Connor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys. Nice seeing everyone.